Oh, that is our friend. Wait, who is the bird? It's D. Who's D? Who's D? I'm not sure. I don't know. D. D is now muted. No, the D's camera's not on. Who is D? I don't know. There's a bird there.
Yeah. Oh, we're saying hello.
Oh, yeah. So who is D?
They were here last week too.
I know, but I'm not sure who it is. But I know it's somebody who's here regular. I should know because it doesn't have a name, but it's somebody that you know.
We're chatting.
They're chatting.
Daniela Carney, hi.
Oh, it's Danielle. That's right. Danielle.
Yeah, I know that
She's
I know that
21.
you're on streaming this to Facebook, and I want to make sure that I don't show up there.
Oh, that's a good reason. Look at her. She's very smart. John just nodding. He likes you. He likes your foresight.
Thank you. I
Nodding.
appreciate that.
He's involved in security, so he knows these kind of things. I shouldn't say that because he's involved in security. But he knows about internet stuff. So Danielle, it's good to have you. And it's very cool that Daniela is also she's a student and she's very creative. And Daniela, I'm gonna see you maybe. I think. Are you gonna come over with your brother?
I'm not sure if I'll be there for that meeting, but I will definitely see you at his bar mitzvah, and it'll be really good to see you.
November. Yeah, her younger brother. And we are now on Facebook. So we are on Facebook right now. And Mike, are you coming back? Okay. I don't trust, I want to say Mike just went into the tech room and I don't trust him. Because he gets into this, he does things in there and he does things in there that he likes to goof around in there. Right, Mike?
Which Mike?
By the way, did the Padres end up winning finally today? They better have won today. Because after beating us so bad, there you go. See, I shouldn't have even said anything. If they didn't do well, I would have been very upset because after beating us, they deserve to go.
10 minutes.
Anyways. Yeah, he's doing. Yeah, I shouldn't have said anything. I know. I invited it. I knew that was a possibility, but he was there so long that I figured he was already doing it. Stop! Enough. Gosh. Mike likes to play around. It's still a story study, but it's still Zman Simchatenu. It's still a time of rejoicing. So we just came out of Simchat Torah. We had a great celebration of reading the Torah. We had a chance to wrap ourselves in the Torah, to unravel the whole Torah. And I'm still tired from it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not tired from that. I am tired from other things, but we got to look at Exodus. We've got to look at what we're reading right now. And we saw the 10 Commandments and we saw the Song of the Sea that we read a couple of weeks ago. And we read this last week. We finished with this part right here that we talked about, which is not boiling a kid in its mother's milk. And from this, yes, and from this, we get the laws of kashrut, or one of the most important laws of kashrut. We already read about not eating a treif animal that was torn up. That was also in Exodus.
Move.
What's that?
Move.
Where you gonna go?
So that's, yeah.
Do the dishes if you haven't gotten to them.
Okay, it's all right. I got it. So what happens is that this phrase pops up 3 times in the Torah. Once in Exodus, once in Leviticus, and once in Deuteronomy. And the fact that it's repeated 3 times gives us a chance to think that maybe it's very important. The fact that it's repeated, yeah. And not all the laws of kashrut are repeated 3 times. And then this one seems to also kind of be connected with the laws of sacrifice for Passover. We read about Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. We read about those holidays. And so then we get into this law that is about whenever, well, it seems as though you're not supposed to boil a kid in its mother's milk. But it seems like maybe that's in the context of a sacrifice. Now, I will tell you that it looks like it looks like it's on the context of the sacrifice.
I got to drink seltzer at dinner instead of milk.
Yeah. It's difficult to look at the context and say, well, it seems like they're talking about sacrifices right here. And they're talking about a certain kind of sacrifice. So it seems like we've taken this law and made it a focal point of our stuff. Now, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. So it's a peculiarity of Jewish behavior that has been part of our lives for over 2,000 years. We know that because by the time of the Talmud, these laws were ingrained. They were very elaborated on, specifically plates and the fact that you can't.
Well, that's where the laws really came from.
Yes. So, but well, it didn't come from there, but they're articulated there. That's where we see them, right? So by that point, we can say, well, they're definitely there. Yeah. And so they're there. And then they're elaborated on in later Jewish sources. But again, look, people have said, based on what I see in the Torah, I don't know why I can't have a plate that I have to have separate plates for dairy and meat. I mean, we until we were vegetarian, we did. I think one of the reasons why I became a vegetarian was just so I didn't have to have two sets of plates. I really that was a piece of it, not the whole thing, but tiny piece of
Dishes after?
what?
Did you have to do the dishes after?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm going to say I didn't do the dishes as much then as I don't do them now, which means I sometimes do them, very rarely. No, but listen, when we had our first sets of dishes, in all seriousness, Glory, we lived in New York, and we didn't live in like a cold water flat or whatever those guys. But we had an apartment. It didn't have a dishwasher, and so our first apartment we didn't have a dishwasher, so we definitely did dishes, and we washed them in the sink, whatever. And it was we didn't even have a dishwasher, but we had love, and we had a tiny little apartment. It was 700 square. It was actually 700 square feet. Yeah.
When we lived in Sedona, Label Wolf came out from Australia.
Orthodox, a Chabad rabbi from Australia. Yeah.
Circumstances, but we helped pay for whatever.
Mhm.
We had a dinner,
Mhm.
just about 10 of us.
Mhm.
Now, the people's house we went to, they were kosher,
Yep.
but Rabbi Wolf needed his food on a paper plate.
Yep.
Even though even though they were,
Yep.
they were in a kosher house.
Yep.
That was just really strange.
Well, it's based on the idea that, again, he doesn't know what kosher observance they have. So he basically just says, I'm not gonna take a chance, and I don't want to embarrass the people. So
He was the
look,
nicest man though.
yeah, no, look, I mean, the guy travels all around the world, so he knows what he's doing. This is his thing, and he knows what he's doing. So we had two sets of dishes. Once we became vegetarian, which we did in New York, by 98, we became vegetarian. So we all of our dishes became dairy, whatever. We didn't have meat dishes anymore. By the way, we have a problem now. We have a dog, so we actually do have meat in our house now. Well, seriously, I mean, we don't serve him on our plates. We don't serve his food. That's not true. He eats off our plates occasionally, right? But he doesn't. We don't serve his food on our plates. We don't take his food. We keep it in his bowl. But we never had that issue before. But I will tell you that when we stopped having those dishes all became dairy dishes, which means that when we registered for our wedding, we had two sets of silverware, two sets of dishes, and we just did it. I mean, we went to Bed Bath what's it called? Crate and Barrel, like everybody else. We did our registration and we did that. And then, our dishes, whenever we stop using a set of dishes, it becomes Passover dishes. So it's crazy, as there was a point in time where we had two sets of dishes for daily use, and we had two sets of different dishes for Passover. Our Passover dishes, when we first got married, were very inexpensive. It was still cutlery, whatever, but we essentially had four sets of dishes. So then our dishes, once we were vegetarian, we only had to have two sets of dishes. We had the regular dishes, and then whatever was our like our Passover dishes today are like a mishmash of 5 generations of dishes. You'll still find our Passover collection still includes some of our original, dishes from our marriage, right?
Wow.
So we see those plates and we go, we've had those plates for 30 years. So, Yep. yeah. So it brings back nice memories. But if we use them every day, obviously we wouldn't stop them. So, but it's crazy when you think about the fact that we still, I sometimes wonder if Moses came back or came to the future and saw what we were doing, he would go like, whoa, I had no idea that this was what the effect of these laws was going to be 3,000 years later. But I think he'd be happy. I think he'd be happy that we were trying to live by these rules, and especially this one, which again, I think from the context, and I'm not the first person to say that, I'm the millionth person to say this. This is a Canaanite practice, probably, where people, and we'll look at this in other laws, that there was an original context of this law, which we really don't even understand anymore, but people would offer a sacrifice of boiling a kid in its mother's milk. But the fact that it's repeated 3 times, the rabbis took seriously, and they said it means you can't mix any kind of meat with milk, including chicken with cheese or chicken with dairy. You can use fish because fish is parv. And again, one of the things we said, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but because it says it 3 times, you can't cook in it, you can't boil it, you can't bake it, you can't do any. It says here boiling, right? So you'd say, well, it just says boiling, but it says it 3 times, which seems to mean you don't use any kind of cooking. You don't cook anyway with it. So it's not just boiling. And of course, it's expanded not just to be goats or, because originally that word gedi is literally a goat. How do we know? You know that word gedi already. Chad gadya means one goat. So a gedi is a kid, a goat. So it's specifically a goat, but we don't just say it's a goat. It's cows, it's chickens, it's any kind of animal, except for fish. For some reason, fish are not considered a high enough level to be an animal.
You said last week that fish is both.
It's parv. So it's not at the level that it needs to be considered to be meat, which is why you can serve lox and bagels, cream cheese. So it's a law that, again, there's a very famous Reform rabbi back in the 50s and 60s, Joachim Prince, and he was pretty famous because he actually was the rabbi chosen to speak at the March on Washington. He was a very famous rabbi who was born in Germany and escaped the Nazis and came to America and became a well-known rabbi in the 50s and 60s. And he was Reform, but he kept kosher, and people used to say to him, why do you keep kosher? You're Reform, you don't need to keep kosher. And he said, I don't need to keep kosher, but it's a peculiarity of our Jewish tradition. And he spoke in very fancy English. He says, it's a peculiarity of the Jewish tradition, but it's a peculiarity that my ancestors were willing to die for. And this was a guy who survived the Holocaust, which it wasn't even an issue in the Holocaust. They didn't care whether you kept kosher, but he said that's why he did it, because it was something that people were willing to give their lives for. So it's an interesting reason, but it tells you a little bit about the power of tradition, at least for some people, that the tradition is, it's something by itself. It's not just the law because it's the law. It's the law because it's something that connects us to our ancestors, right? So it's pretty cool to think about the fact that Jews were following these laws a long time ago. All right. So speaking, I'll show you in a second. I'm going to show it at the end. I got something really crazy that came in an email the other day, yesterday at 2:30. I'll show you later at the end of class. So let me see. Hold a second. Yeah, I'll show you at the end of class. So, all right, so let's continue. Let's move on into here, I'll show you. I'm going to show you now. I can't stop myself. So a friend of mine, a guy who's not Jewish, sent me this picture last week, or so yesterday. What I'm saying, this was my great grandfather Jacob Elishewitz, and that's my great grandfather. And they took this picture. They took this picture in the United States. This grandfather was actually born in Lebanon while his dad was doing business in Israel. And then on the way back, about I want to say about 1890. I don't know, but he found it. This guy who's not Jewish, he said, I was looking through ancestry.com, which means he was stalking me on ancestry.com, and he found this picture, and he said, did you know these people? I said, yeah, that's Jacob, and that's his wife Celia, and that's my great grandfather, and then I know he died before I was born, but his son, my grandfather, I knew, and then these guys were his brothers, his younger brothers. So I found it interesting that they found this picture. So I didn't have this picture. Yeah.
I have a picture of my father that's very similar,
From,
except that his hair, they cut the
uh-huh.
hair and they framed the photograph.
Yeah, they did that. I have one of my grandfather like that. It's crazy.
He was adorable.
So I just thought that was a weird picture because, first of all, yeah, somebody colorized it, but it also shows you that at least by this point in time, these guys had enough money to get a picture done. Crazy. Yeah, my mom's dad. That's my mom.
Kind of
Yeah,
see your mom
yeah,
in your great grandfather.
yeah.
Just kind of.
Well, my uncle, her brother, looked exactly like the same ears, and I have those ears a little bit, but not like that. Those are some big ears. But yeah, this guy made a fortune in hats. He had a whole hat operation in Panama, real Panama hat. He kind of introduced the Panama hat to America.
Oh my God.
And you know who killed his business? John Kennedy. He didn't wear a hat for his inauguration. Seriously. And that killed the hat business.
Wow.
That's a fact. Like you can look it up. You can find it. I mean, it's like a fact.
Yeah.
Killed the hat business when he didn't wear a hat to the inauguration. First president ever to not wear a hat. Yeah, but he didn't. So it's crazy. And so this guy made a fortune, made through the Depression, all that kind of stuff. He owned this whole tract of land out in Long Island. Like I saw it, like I looked it up. I don't know how. No, it was long gone before that. It would have been worth like $1 billion. Like I looked at how big this land was and I was like, that's crazy. So, I mean, people had told me about it when I was younger and I was like, didn't matter. But then I looked it up and it was, no, it kind of was just like, so what, like, so he had a lot of money. But then it was funny because he was very Jewish. He was very religious. And people were like, people in the hat business knew him and knew that he was religious, that his religion was important to him. So I read this article, I found this old magazine about the hat business, and it talked about how important the Jewish tradition was to him. But it was written, like by a Gentile person going in. His tradition is very important. Like, it was kind of nice. I mean, it was a little condescending, but it was kind of nice. Anyways, so people, they lived like that, and they still found a way to make tradition important to them. Crazy. Anyways, yeah, but I think about that sometimes. The fact that these people still found a way to keep their tradition, even moving around and doing their thing. Anyways, so let me put up what we're reading today, which is, I am sending a messenger before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have made ready. Pay heed to him and obey him. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him. Now, lest you think this is Moses, it's not Moses, because Moses does not have my name in him. This is an angel, which, interestingly enough, what does your translation say, Glory, for that?
God's angels prepare the way is the title.
Yeah.
See, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion, since my name is in him.
Yeah, so it's pretty much a warning. Don't mess around with this angel, which is kind of weird because we don't really hear about this angel doing stuff, but it's almost like God is saying, I am going to send somebody to take care of you, to do my business with you while you're in the wilderness. Now we know that there's a pillar of fire and there's the pillar of cloud that leads the people at night and in the day. And maybe that's what this is referring to. But this seems like it's a very, it doesn't seem like it's just the pillar, if you will. It's not just a sign. That what this is literally like a representative of God on earth, an angel, if you will, which is why it's translated in the other translation is that what yours has too, Barry? An angel? Yeah, capital A. It means business. And again, don't defy him because it's not going to go well for you if you don't. So this seems to be that there's a presence of God with the people, according to this, that they better not get out of line with. Now, of course, we know that they do, but it at least allows the possibility that some people believed that when Israel was when Israel is in confrontation with God while they're in the wilderness, that it's not necessarily God with a capital G, but an angel with a capital A, which means it's still God. I mean, it's a part of God, but that maybe, at least according to what some people believed in the biblical period, that this is an angel that's dealing with the people. That God kind of subcontracts out the work here to an angel. And again, the angel has the responsibilities. The angel's me. My name's in him. But don't screw up. If you obey him and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemy and a foe to your foes. When my messenger goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I annihilate them, you shall not bow down to their gods and worship or follow their practices, but shall tear them down and smash their pillars to bits. Now, of course, we know that they don't do that. This is a warning that they didn't heed because they did destroy them. God destroyed them. They destroyed them. They didn't kill all of them, which here it basically says that they are going to be annihilated. They don't all get annihilated. And then, of course, the people then bow down to their gods and follow their practices. So they didn't follow this, and this is why they got into trouble. So this is already giving you the understanding that they screwed up. Yeah.
Kind of jumped into this a bit late, but from day one, how many years are we in now?
So from year one of what? What do you mean?
Genesis from the world.
So going back to Genesis,
Exodus 23.
so going back from Genesis, going back from Adam and Eve to the point we are here, we would be about 2,500 years later after Adam and Eve, about 1,000 years after Abraham, 700-800 years after Abraham, included hundreds of years of Egyptian bondage mainly, and now they're here. So look, based on, and this is where, people go, is the world really 6,000 years old? Based on the counting of the Bible, we're in year 5783. So almost 6,000 years. So if you go back 3,200 years, 1200 BC, this is Moses's time. So it's 3,200 years back from here, and then it would be another 2,500 back to Abraham, roughly. 2,500 years. To Adam and Eve. Like I said, about 1,000 years back to Abraham, or 700-800 years. So in time lapse, that's how far back it would be. So that's the problem. Is if Adam and Eve are from the beginning of time, then that's a problem because it only goes back 5,700, 6,000 years ago. But
So if you read this thing, God and his prophets were having a hard time corralling this.
yeah, and that gets to the point where we are now, which is because remember, we're also reading Wednesday morning's class. Tuesday morning class. See how tired I am. Tuesday morning class is from the time of Kings. It's from the time of about 700, we're 700 BC, so we're 500 years after this. So 500 years pass from Moses to the time of Elijah. So that's 500 years, which is still 2,700 years ago from us. Because again, if this is 3,200 years ago and Elijah is 700 years after this, it's 2,500, 2,600 years ago is the time of Elijah. So that's how far back this is. So during this period of time, the biblical period, which again, if you think about it, the biblical period ends, or at least the part of the Bible that we, that when the Bible ends, we talked about when prophecy ends, that ends. There's nothing in the Bible that takes place after 300 BCE. Was the Bible finally edited then? No. But the earliest events that happened in the Bible, the most recent events, or whatever you want to say, the earliest events, the latest events, really, the most recent events are the time of Esther, which is about 300 BCE. So 2,300 years ago. So that's the newest stuff that happens in the Bible. There's nothing newer that happens after that. There's no historical occurrences after that. The rabbis essentially say that period is over. And that's still, again, if you think about it, it's still 300 years before Jesus, 300 years before the Romans. So it's still a long time. I mean, it's not a long time, but Jews had already come to the conclusion by the time, well before, generations before Jesus, to say, God doesn't send angels anymore. God doesn't do this anymore. God.
I find it interesting because he's sending his prophets down, and people are, sun or whatever it might be, whatever the gods are that he's having a hard time corralling people.
Yeah.
This creation. I find it
Yeah.
very interesting.
So people, yeah, and that goes on for a long time. The inability for people to give up the idols goes on for a long time. So it goes on from this period, right? From the time of Moses, at least. We're going to read about the golden calf in a couple of weeks. Goes all the way from there, all the way to the time of the end of the Bible, the end of that biblical period. Look, by the time of the Roman era, Jews were not worshiping idols very frequently. It's not that they weren't. I mean, there might have been occasional, I won't say there were no Jews that had idols, but it wasn't a problem. It was no longer a problem. And that's maybe why you'd say, why did the prophets stop doing what they're doing? Because people don't need to hear that message anymore. People they've accepted that God isn't something that they're going to encounter in an idol. Romans were also giving up those gods too. They didn't find a lot of logic in that kind of behavior either. But Jews weren't dealing with that by that period. That was not their issue. There was other problems. I mean, it's not like everything was great. The priesthood was corrupt. There was a lot of things that they were doing that were not good. They weren't treating each other necessarily well. There were Jews that were arguing over whether to collaborate with the Romans or whether to fight them. And they were willing to kill each other over it. They were willing to kill each other. They were willing to kill other Jews over that issue. So the issue wasn't there were other issues, but this issue was not their issue. That was not their issue. You shall serve your God Adonai, who will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman in your land shall miscarry or be barren. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. By the way, I want to point out that this is interesting because we read this word yesterday, Tuesday, where we were talking about the water of the land that was causing it to be a place of death, right? That was the word that we had yesterday. Meshakelah, Meshakelot was the word that we had in the Tuesday class. The water that Elisha cures. You remember that, Mike? So I don't know, but the point is, the water, right, was bad and the land was also bad. And it said, one of the translations we had was that it was causing women to miscarry. I think that was what your translation had, right? Wasn't it your translation that said?
Trying to remember.
The translation we had in the Hebrew was bereavement, was causing bereavement or death. And then the other one said miscarriages. Well, here it translated the same word in here as miscarriage. So here it says, no woman in your land shall miscarry or be barren. Those two words are juxtaposed next to each other because there's a difference. These are women that are they're having stillborn. These are women who can't get pregnant. But both are listed there. And these are considered to be things that are a sign of blessing. Not being able to have children is probably one of the worst things that could happen to a individual, but on a national level, it would be terrible. So this is a pretty big statement that if you follow the rules, that God's going to make sure that no woman miscarries. That seems like a bit of a high bar to set. But look, I mean, the point is that they're hoping that that wouldn't happen. They're hoping that no woman should have to deal with that. And that you'll be able to have a long life. That's a nice way, poetic way of saying that you'll be able to have a long life, right? You'll have fullness of days, but that you'll also, I like the translation. What does your translation have for that, Glory?
It does say miscarry or
And
barren.
yeah.
I will give you a full lifespan.
Yeah. Yeah, the Hebrew translation is a little bit more poetic than the actual. Glory's translation is a little bit more literal. That's probably what you have too, and you're pretty similar to Mary, right, in the King James.
The number of days.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is interesting because that seems to mean that people get an allotted time, which is a little different than what that is. But this is nice. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. That's even nicer because that seems to mean that you not only get a long life, but you get to enjoy it. It's not really what it says. I mean, the translation is really, I'll give you what you're due as far as your life. It's really what it's saying. I will give you the full count of your days, which is not necessarily enjoy, but it's nice. It's a nice translation, but it's also being like, I'll give you what you're due as far as your lifespan. I will send forth my terror before you, and I will throw into panic all the people among whom you come, and I will make your enemies turn tail before you. I will send a plague ahead of you, and it shall drive out before you the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply to your hurt. So this isn't going to happen over one night or a couple of days or even a year, because if I do it too quickly, the land is going to go wild, and then you will come there and you'll have a problem. That wild animals will be there. It's going to be a desolation when you get there, and it's going to be really bad. So if I leave the Canaanites there for a while, they'll be able to maintain it, but I will get rid of them. And I'll get rid of them by creating terror. I'm going to do it with giving them disease. I'm going to help you, right? I'm going to do the work for you. You're not even going to have to kill these people. You're not even going to have to go to war against them. I'm going to do it. So there seems to be, again, now when you say, well, did this really happen? Well, to some extent it does. The book of Joshua we read shows that the Israelites did drive out a lot of the Canaanites. They did win some very miraculous wars. God helped them destroy Jericho by taking down the walls, which nobody thought could happen, and they did. They didn't even have to die in that. They didn't have to attack the walls. God took them down. So God did do miracles, but God doesn't do this. So there is the argument or the fact that maybe God doesn't deliver on this because we don't deliver. And that what God does do for us is a compromised version. It's the less full version of what could have happened if we hadn't screwed up in the desert. So when people say, well, this didn't happen. Well, yeah, it didn't happen because we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And God actually says, that, you've got to do what, you've got to do what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, it's not going to be good for you. And if you do follow his word, if you do obey him, I'll be an enemy to your enemy. So he doesn't say this is just unconditional. So again, it shows that people were worried about wild beasts that would hurt you if the cities are left alone, they're going to be filled with wild beasts when you get there. So it's going to be incremental. I will drive them out before you little by little until you've increased and possessed the land. So that seems to also beg the question, kind of like we said, why didn't the Israelites drive them all out right away? Why didn't God just wipe them all out? And that's the answer the Bible gives, so that they could gradually take over. And so it kind of would have answered the question of why would God not just destroy everything? Like, why didn't God just clear out the land and let us all walk in? Now, again, we didn't do what we were supposed to do, but even if this was the plan that doesn't get implemented, I think it kind of like leaves us with the understanding that, yeah, there's a reason why God didn't just wipe out all the Canaanites with a plague before we came in. That's their answer. It would have created a problem. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you will drive them out before you. Well, before we move off of this, let's just take a very quick look at what they are talking about here, because this seems like a much bigger Israel than what we have today. And that is true. And that's why some people say that Israel is not as big as what God told us it could be. So let us take a quick look at the map of what we're actually talking about. A map of Israel. So let me give you this one. So let us put this up right now. So this is the map of the tribes once they come into the land. And you can see that the land that they inhabit goes all the way up to Lebanon, talking about Lebanon again, all the way up into this part of Syria. This is the Golan Heights would be here. So it goes even further north into Syria. Aram is modern day Syria. This is modern day Jordan. This is where Ammon is. It's called Ammon. And the Ammonites and the Moabites. And then here's Edom, the Edomites. So these are all Jordan. So part of this was where tribes were. During the time of King David, it goes all the way over to here. But what they're saying here is that the part that God actually tells them that they can have goes all the way from, as you just read, it goes from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, the wilderness of from the wilderness to the Euphrates. And so if we were going to look at a map of what that would be like today, this is what it would be like today. How big we're talking about Israel would have been. So This is looking at the map of Israel today. This is where Israel is in the northern boundaries. This is the Golan Heights. So they're saying that it goes all the way to the Euphrates River, which is right up. Show you from where it's trying to show you the Golan all the way to where the Euphrates is. It is all the way up here. So I can't even show you on a map of how far north this would be. But if I zoom out now, you can see this is where Israel's border is today. And this is where they're saying it would go up to. Right about here. You know, I can't show you the Euphrates on this map. How far north that they're talking about? Well, I can kind of show you. You can see the Euphrates right here. So from here to here would be how far north it would be. And from this area right here, from the Sinai all the way out to somewhere here, going up to here, and then across over to here. It ends at the Mediterranean. So that's a pretty big, much bigger than Israel is today. It would include a lot of Jordan. It would include a lot of Syria, right? And this would all be part of Israel. I don't think Israel really wants this right now either. This is Syria. This is a disaster area right now. But actually, this area of Iraq is pretty much a disaster area too. But at the biblical period, this was the Fertile Crescent. So this is everything you see in the green is the Fertile Crescent from Egypt. You know, you had to walk up here in order to get down to here. So the green area was the fertile. It's the Fertile Crescent. So this is the area. Follow along there, because you can't go across here. That's the desert that you die if you go across here. So you have to go up here and then you come back down. So this is basically saying that Israel would be all the way up to here. Would be up to here. And so that's several hundred miles. That's 300, 400 miles. Now, look, by our standards, this is not a ridiculous sized country. I mean, this is a ridiculous sized country because Israel is a tiny peanut, the size, as we say, of New Jersey. But it's a tiny country based on, how big these other countries would be. But they're basically saying that Israel would have been, at least the way God is showing it, would go from here to there. So a good chunk of the Middle East to the Mediterranean. Why is this important? Well, you've seen a flag of Israel before, right? Right? You've seen a flag of Israel, right? Yeah. And for the people who are at home, let's just show a flag of Israel real quick. There's the flag of Israel. So there's an interesting thing that you may not know. There is a lie that's told in the Arab world that the reason that the two blue lines are here is because this is supposed to be the border of Israel from the Euphrates to the Mediterranean. Now, this is ridiculous. I mean, you and I laugh at this, but there are people who say that the reason that those two blue lines symbolize the greater territorial ambitions of Israel. And they believe it. They say it. They 100% believe it. I mean, I'm telling you this because it's so ridiculous that you wouldn't even believe it. You've never even heard it. But they literally will tell people that this is I mean, this is widely believed in the Arab world. It's widely believed in and taught in Iran that the flag of Israel is the flag of the ambitions of the Jewish people. And again, it's based on the idea that flags, are representative of, what people's values are. I mean, the flag of Saudi Arabia is this. That's a sword. It's a sword of war. That's what that is, right? So that's a real, that's a real thing. I mean, that's not having a flag. Whoa, that's not what I want to show. Having a flag like that is, that's what people put on their flags. They put things on their flags that they believe, especially in the Arab world. So this is the flag of the people that are currently in, these are the people who are currently in fighting for their territory in Yemen. This is the flag of the Houthi people, the people that are in charge of what used to be North Yemen. So this is their flag, which is got 4 lines of text, right? There's the 4 lines of text. 4 lines of text say, well, actually there's 5 lines of text, but I'll show you what they're, this is, yeah. Although the parts in green are the positive parts, because green is, go. God is greater than everything. Here's the parts in red, which is the color of blood. Death to America, death to Israel, curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam. So again, the positive parts are the parts that are in green. And these are the parts that are the, things you're supposed to scream. You're supposed to be screaming. This is the flag of the Houthi of Yemen. These are the people that are our allies in this fight are the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So they're fighting against these people right now. The Houthis are being backed by they're being backed by Iran. But you can see that they also are very friendly with Palestinians. And again, they didn't invent this, the Houthis. This was a chant that was used by Iran. Allahu Akbar, and there you have, death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews. So look, I mean, that's what the flag of Yemen used to be. And then this was the flag that's now being used that you'll see all over Yemen today. You probably didn't know that you made a flag. You didn't know that, John. You made someone's flag. I mean, there's 13 million Jews in the world, 14 million Jews maybe in the world, and we're on someone's flag. A place where there are no Jews anymore. There's maybe 100 Jews left in Yemen, 75, 80 Jews left in Yemen. And yet, we made their flag. Oh, man. So we talk about flags, and they believe that our flag shows our territorial ambitions, and our flag is a war against them, which is ridiculous because our flag is based on a talit. That's it. It was a talit. Nothing else but a talit. The blue from a talus. So, wow. Anyways, so this is actually relevant today. I mean, this is actually something that I want to tell you. This actually means something to people because they know that it's in the Bible. They just don't really understand that we don't teach that this is what our ambitions are. Don't make covenants with their gods. Don't make a breach with them. Don't make a breach with their gods. They shall not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For you will serve their gods, and it will prove a snare to you. Which of course it does. And some people say that the reason it's there is because it explains what happened, which is that we started worshiping Canaanite gods. And that's what we're reading about in the book of Judges. How by that period, it became so pervasive that Jews go back and forth between Canaanite gods and God. So God said to Moses, and this is the beginning of chapter 24, God said to Moses, come up to Adonai with Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. Those are his 2 sons, the ones who are going to be priests. They're the ones that are going to be the next priests after Aaron, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. Remember, this is all still happening at Mount Sinai. Moses alone shall come near Adonai, but the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with them. So again, this is God speaking about himself essentially in third person. Moses is the only one who can come up the whole way. The others, will come to me, but they're not going to come up with me. And Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of Adonai and all the rules, and the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things that Adonai has commanded, we will do. Now, what's so weird about this scene is, as I told you, this seems like commandments. And it ends here. So all of chapter 23, all of chapter 24, all of chapter 22 and chapter 23, up until these first verses of chapter 24, seem to be the commandments that God gave to the people at Mount Sinai. And here they say, all the things that God has said, we will do. Now, we know that they said that before he even gave them the law. I told you the story that, we believe that shows the Jewish people's conviction and commitment to God, that they said it even before they heard the laws. Well, here they've heard the laws and they say, all the things that God has commanded, we will do. So what you have, if the Ten Commandments are a part of that, or if they're a different set of rules, and then the other rules were added to it, and again, just so you're not confused, and you have your Bibles, if you have your Bible in front of you, great. If not, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to just turn back to where these laws started, back to chapter 21. These are the rules that you shall set before them. So chapter 20, we said, has rules. It ends right here. All the people witnessed, and they fell back and stood at a distance, right? This is the end of the Ten Commandments. But there seems to be another version of those commandments. And these are the ones that Moses gets either by himself or in front of them, but they're not hearing it. And then these laws start here, right? And we get another set of laws. And these laws go, we read them all, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, the whole discussion we had about abortion and whether that's the introduction to what happens, the goring ox, all those laws, all the way through the laws of celebrating the holidays, all the way up to what we just read.
There are no laws in Genesis?
No laws in Genesis.
Just for 1,000 years, whatever it was? How many years?
Yes.
500 years?
Yes.
Lawless?
Not lawless. That's the issue, John. What did they have? So the rabbis didn't like to imagine that Abraham didn't have these laws. So the argument that they had, that kind of, again, it wasn't lawless because they were a family. So the issue is so did Abraham have these laws? Did Abraham have these laws? Did Abraham have a law not to boil a kid in its mother's milk? Did Abraham have these laws that, he's supposed to celebrate Sukkot and Shavuot and offer up sacrifices, all those laws? The rabbis don't like the idea that Abraham didn't have those laws. They like the idea that Abraham was taught these laws, that God imparted these laws to him. As a matter of fact, the rabbis go even further back. They like to think that Adam and Eve knew these laws. These were imparted to them from the very beginning, that the Torah must have existed before. So they don't like the idea that there was not the laws out there. What happens is that when Jews are in Egypt, when they become a people, when they become numerous, they were living in, that was the vacuum, was in Egypt. They weren't a family anymore. These laws couldn't be passed around to the fire. And not only that, they were living in Egypt where they were slaves. They couldn't follow the laws anyways. So what happens to them is that they get reintroduced to the law at Mount Sinai, not given the law for the first time, but reintroduced to the law that they already had. They really don't like the idea that Abraham didn't keep kosher. They're not even going to entertain that. And where do they get that from? Well, the Torah seems to be at least accessible. The Torah starts at creation, right? So it says that at the very beginning, God created, and there's the Torah. So the rabbis interpret this, and also we know this because the Christians interpret it as well this way. When God created light, he didn't create light. He created the Torah. When God says Yehi Or, it's the light of the Torah. And so the light that was created at the beginning was God literally bringing those first words into existence. So the first letters that come off of God's mouth into the world are the Torah when they create, right? So the Torah was there at the beginning because God speaks the Torah, and the Torah essentially is there from the moment of creation. Is unfolding from the moment of creation. It exists. Since I'll ask Mary to read it. Mary, since you have the Bible of the Christians in with you as well, can you turn to the Gospel of John and read to me the Midrash that's in the Gospel, the first words of the Gospel of John in the Christian Bible? This is from the Christian scriptures.
If I remembered what it was, I could have read it to you without reading.
Okay.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was.
Where do you think they got that from? They got that from rabbinic tradition. They didn't invent, that was literally what I just told you, because the rabbis had said the same thing. That when God created, the first thing that God created was the word. Logos is the word that's used in Greek. So this was what we believed and what we've taught for a long time. So to get to John's very important question, they must have had the Torah. The idea that Abraham didn't have the Torah was too much for them to wrap their heads around. Because if the Torah is eternal, then it was at the beginning and it's always there. So it's always going to be there. And so it had to be there. And so, because if there was a time when it wasn't there, then there could be a time when it won't be there. And they couldn't entertain that thought. They couldn't entertain the idea that it was ever a time that the world didn't have the Torah, because the world needs the Torah. The world literally is sustained by Torah. So they couldn't imagine the Torah not being there. And so when the Christians wrote those words, they were also writing what Jewish people had been teaching at least for the last few hundred years, which is that the Torah was always there. The Torah, it doesn't say that in the Torah. The Torah doesn't say, I was at the very beginning. It doesn't say that in the Torah. But by the time of the rabbis, by the time of Christian tradition, you would say that and nobody would have challenged it because everybody believed it. Anyways, it means that the Torah is eternal, and it means that it was there from the beginning. So.
Now, we believe that our country was founded on Judeo-Christian values, on the Torah, on the Bible, on religious imperatives, and it's being challenged now, and almost as if that never existed, and we're making up new things now.
Well, look, the history is, it's a fact. So the question is what do people, how will people read that? Look, you can say that some of the history is problematic. No one's saying the history isn't problematic, but the reality is that there is a history. There's a real history there, and the history is factually true that the founding fathers were steeped in this stuff, and they knew the Bible. They read it in Greek. They read it in Hebrew, we've talked about it before. Hebrew was a required language at Harvard and Yale. Both schools required Hebrew as part of the graduation requirements for the school. It wouldn't have been done if it was just important to know the Christian Bible, then they would have just required Greek and Latin, but they required Hebrew too. So I think, it's pretty clear that existed. I think that for some of the founding fathers, they actually believed that what they were doing was recreating this, which is a text that was going to be eternal and that was going to be the framework for the covenant, for a new covenant. We talk about that, and we talk about those covenant agreements that go back even before that to the pilgrims, to the founding, compacts of the Plymouth colony. I mean, people talked about these agreements that people made to form, their colonies or to form their alliance, to have a text that was going to be there. So I think that was definitely important to them to see these texts as covenants, which to me at least, and again, I could be wrong, it's my feeling, and I'm probably biased because I love this country, is actually more Judeo than it is Christian. Because even though that line is really a powerful line from John, the reality is that the Jewish people were the ones who were actually concerned with the book. It's not that Christianity wasn't concerned with the Bible. They translated it and they read it, and that was very important to Christianity. But what was different is that at least until, for a long time, the translations and the power of that was kept by a church that really didn't care whether people read it or not. That's one of the things that was a determinant factor for Protestantism, which was we're going to translate the Bible into every language that people speak, and we're going to give the freedom of the reading and the interpretation to the people. But to some extent, that didn't happen until the 1500s and 1600s for Christians. They didn't have that opportunity. Jews had that opportunity for over 2,000 years because it was required. Every Jewish kid had to learn how to read the Torah.
Right.
It didn't mean that it didn't mean they read lots of books, but they could all read the Torah. So basic literacy was required for the Jewish community. So it changed the dynamic a little bit. But look, America was founded up essentially on Protestant, values and theories too, which was you got to read, you got to have a text that is important to you, and it was very important for Protestant church and for the early founders of this country. So I would say it's actually probably more Judeo-Protestant than Judeo-Christian, but I'm not going to split hairs. The reality is that it's always been an issue for us. It's been an issue for Christians for the last 400 or 500 years of their history, and it's the backbone for universities and for the idea that people have to be literate. Unfortunately, we're going to get political again. Those have been hijacked as well. But the reality is that the idea was that people would go to university to be literate and to be exposed to these ideas. And quite frankly, the critical thinking, which was also required people to have discussions and debates, which they're not allowed to have either anymore. So, yeah, so here's where we are before we get into more politics. So it seems like the moment where the people accept the rest of the law. And it says, Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of Adonai and all the rules. And the people said, we'll do. Naaseh, and they said, we'll do. All right. They all answered. All the people answered, right? Moses then wrote down the commands of Adonai. Early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. So this says that he wrote down the laws.
That's important. Well, no.
It is. No, it is.
It gets back to this. I know this sounds silly, but I'm getting into this. I'm really enjoying this. If these are stories, these are families and stories and told, basically Genesis is written down. 1,000 years later, so you're assuming these stories, right? I get that.
No, it's exactly what you said. Rashi's commentary is when he wrote down, he wrote down that. It's exactly what you just said.
So you have to go back to the people that wrote down in Genesis, always, you know, it's like, come on, it's like playing telephone, right? Is 1,000, whenever they started writing, is it?
Oh, yeah, no, yes, your- no,
but
but listen, your point is that at a certain point, they wrote it down. And once it's written down, number one, it's no longer oral. It's no longer an oral tradition, right? So it can be, you can say, well, did God really say that? Who wrote that? When it's an oral tradition, people would just say, well, that's what I was told. And you're essentially repeating God's word. And, you know, you have to say, well, the people who told me this said this is what God's word was. So once it's written down, there's a certain impact it has, which is one of the reasons why what was written down here. Well, here they say everything from Bereshit to, but not including the account of the giving of the Torah. And he wrote down the commandments that were given to him, which is interesting because what it's basically telling us is he did not write down the 10 commandments, or he didn't write down. Hold it one second. Let me just show you. No, that's actually the whole commentary here, but which is actually they're saying based on, you know, Rashi is saying this is based on rabbinic tradition from 1,000 years before over 1,000 years before he wrote it. So did he write down? What did he write down? Here they're saying he wrote down everything up till the point where we're at right now. But there's at least this understanding that the 10 commandments themselves were written down in a different way. And that's something that it's almost as if to say that even if the rest of the words are oral, there were some things that were written down directly from God, and that those became special. I will tell you that according to what this says, he wrote down all of the text that he just had. I mean, at least this is what I say. That's not the traditional answer, the one I'm giving you right now. What is the commentary in your book say for this, by the way?
Well, first of all, it says Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. And then mine just says, to go keep a note on verse 17, 14. No, I haven't looked it up yet.
Oh,
14.
interesting.
And then also see the introduction, which there's an introduction at the front. Author and date of writing. It doesn't say much.
No, but it does, because it's saying, getting back to what John's point was, which is, well, who wrote this down and when did they write it down? So they're actually answering that question for you. They're going to give you in the introduction what they feel is the questions of biblical authorship. Look, the Bible says right here that Moses wrote something down.
Fine. No, and I might have missed it, right? I mean, from what we read.
Yeah.
It's the first time I'm seeing something.
Yep.
Pen to paper.
Yep.
or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Quill.
So exactly. So we haven't read yet. And this is a real important point, because you once you've read it and you've read it in the full context, they don't have the 10 commandments yet, which is what Rashi's note was reminding us. Because as of right now, we don't have the hard copy of the 10 commandments. We're going to get them because Moses is going to go up on the mountain to get the 10 commandments. And that's where,
Stone.
and that's where the whole thing goes crazy, right? What's confusing is that there's a version of this story which says that Moses already wrote down laws before he went up and got them. The problem is that this description seems to be the law code that he just got, which is more than just the 10 commandments. So these are the laws that he wrote down here, which are the laws of Mishpatim. And it seems as though he wrote them down and he put them, you know, he literally does a religious service here. He set up an altar. with one pillar for each one of the tribes of Israel. And it says that he brought out, well, it doesn't say he brought out, but they were there, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. So he has priests there to do this too. So what happens is, well, here, let's read it. I kind of skipped ahead. He designated some assistants among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to Adonai. Moses took, by the way, here it says Moses did it. It doesn't even say the priest did it. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. And he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. And they all said, and they said, all that Adonai has spoken, we will faithfully do. And Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant that Adonai now makes with you concerning all these commands. And then Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders of Israel ascended. And they saw the God of Israel, under whose feet was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Now, before we get into that weird comment, by the way, I want to see what Rashi says about that little bit we just read. Let's see what Rashi says about this. Yeah, so they are saying that Moses took half the blood. How do you take half the blood? Angels came down and divided the blood into halves, because blood isn't like a thing that you can just split into half. So there, but that's not the line that I thought he'd be commenting on. No, I was looking for the fact that this is, again, not a normal thing that it's not a normal thing that Moses offers up a sacrifice. Now they're there, and it also says that Moses, they said that Moses designated people to help him with it. Right. They're just as lads, Narim. But yeah, they don't comment too much on the fact that these are not really done by the priests, but the priests are there. I mean, I think the tradition is that the priests helped with it. But here's an interesting little commentary that I want to show you. Now they saw the God of Israel. They gazed intently, and failing in this, they peeped in their attempt to catch a glimpse of the supreme being, and thereby they made themselves liable to death. It was only because God did not wish to disturb the joy caused by the giving of the Torah that he did not punish them instantly, but waited to postpone the punishment for Nadav and Avihu until the day when the tabernacle was dedicated, which they were stricken with death, and for the elders until the event of which the text relates, and when the people complained and the fire of the Lord burned among them and destroyed them. So what just happened here? They try to see, it says that they tried to catch a glimpse of the supreme being. And God would have killed them right then and there for trying to catch a glimpse of God. You're doing things that they're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to look at God. But God did not destroy them. And it says that God destroyed them later, which is the very strange story of Nadav and Avihu getting blown up, right? Which we're going to read in the book of Leviticus. It's one of the only stories in the entire book of Leviticus, right? We read about how these guys, chapter 11.
Delayed punishment.
Yeah, but in chapter 11. Oh, that's Numbers 11. That's not
It
that.
wasn't Tuesday, but didn't we discuss, wasn't there a? Jimmy,
What?
I'm getting mixed up,
What?
Where God said you can't come behind him.
Yeah. No, he says, no, we haven't read it on Tuesdays. God appears to Elijah and And he doesn't, he comes to him in the still small voice. But I think maybe we showed it where God says to Moses, "You can't see me." I don't think we showed that part.
I'll find it because I wanted.
Oh, no,
Another movie that was written out in the Bible.
no, we will read that. We will read it in chapter 32. We're coming up to it, where God actually, Moses says, "I want to see you," and God says, "You can't see me." But here's the description of it. Under whose feet was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire. What's the translation, Glory, you have? I don't think it'll be a pavement of sapphire, but it is a.
Okay, went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement
Oh.
made of sapphire.
Is that what King James has too? Pavement?
Paved wood of sapphire.
Okay. So the word in Hebrew for sapphire is saphir. Guess what? Sapphire is an Arabic Hebrew word. It's from our language. That's how sapphire got into English. So it's our word. But look what it says. It looks like the sky. So it's a blue that reminds us of the sky. And it says it's for purity. So it's a blue. So in the description of what we see in heaven, it is a blue. It looks like a blue floor. Under God's feet is a blue floor. But they can't see past that. They can't see past the blue floor. So this is about all that we're supposed to see. If we try to see God, we shouldn't see past the blue floor. So
My footnote says they saw ... God, but not in the fullness of his glory.
Yeah, it is a basis of Jewish teaching. Let me show you. I will show you the discussion of it in blue. Here is the lesson of the blue. Let me give it to you. Hold it. So where is the okay, so here is the answer. Or here's the teaching that I wanted to share with you. Which gets back to something that we already talked about. So actually, I'll show this site. I'll show this site here. So a talit has blue on it. This is what, as I said, the flag of Israel is based on talit. But originally, talit says the fringe has blue in it. So the blue wool was called techelet, which was a symbol of holiness. This is, by the way, from Chabad's website. So this is traditional Judaism. So it originally had blue thread. We don't use talit with blue threads anymore. And it talks about why we have blue. And we don't exactly know how to make that exact blue. So we don't do it. So it says, why don't we have it anymore? The color became unavailable, and So we don't actually do it anymore. So this is about the shell. This is the Murex shell. That's the Murex where they get the blue dye. It was very big, and it was a big part of Lebanese of Tyre and Sidon. We found billions of these shells that they used throughout history to drill out and get the dye. Hold it a second. It doesn't say it here. But yeah, this is the blue dye. And when we see the blue on the fringe, the blue fringe, which now is the blue color on the talit, we don't put it on the fringe, we put it on the lines of it. We don't put it on the fringe anymore because we know we're not doing the right fringe, but we still are the right color. But we still do that color, or we try to approximate the color on the bands. But because we're not doing it on a thread, we're not violating any rule by not using the right color. So when we see the fringe, right? So let me just show you one thing. This is from the Aish website. So this is also Orthodox. And here it says the blue in the Israeli flag is based on the blue string that's tzitzit. And this talks about how they made the flag, right? So here's what I wanted to show you. The color of the blue is similar to the color of the clear sky. The purpose of the dye string is thus to remind us that God in heaven is watching us, and our actions should reflect that realization. So that blue in the talit is actually to remind us of this blue that we just read about, which is the blue that Moses and these guys see when they try to look at God. And so it is the color of sapphire, like the sky. So this is why this blue is so important to us. So when we see it, we think of heaven. When we see the blue on the talit, we think of heaven. But it's a very scary thing because we're not supposed to look at heaven. And Nadav and Avihu, we're not supposed to look directly at heaven. And that's why Nadav and Avihu wind up getting killed later on. Their punishment gets postponed, but they do get punished. And so when people say, well, it seems like they get punished really disproportionately in Leviticus, it's because they also did this here, which is they're always trying to push the envelope. And they shouldn't have been trying to peep at God. It says, God did not raise a hand against the elder of the Israelites. They beheld God and they ate and drank. And so it's when it says that that God didn't raise a hand, it's basically saying, again, God didn't punish them at that moment because he could have. It's also could be that whatever, God in that moment said it was okay to be in my presence. And here's what it says. Adonai said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them. And so here it says that God tells him, I'm going to give you a copy. Well, it just said that Moses wrote a copy. Well, this again seems to be a different thing, which is all 613 commandments are implicitly contained in the 10 commandments and may therefore be regarded as having been written on the tablets. Rabbi Saadia specified, and the Saadia Gaon lived 1200 years ago. He says that the commandments are all included in those 10 commandments. But by this point in time, they understood that all the commandments, we don't want to say that they weren't in what was given by God at Mount Sinai. It seems as though it is just either the 10 commandments or maybe the commandments that they've gotten up until this point, the commandments that were just given to them. But it does seem that it ends here. But we know it doesn't end here. And the rabbis didn't want to have that as a possibility. Because all the rules that are in Leviticus, all the rules, there aren't many rules in Numbers. There's hardly any mitzvot in Numbers. But then we get all the laws in Deuteronomy. And that's where most of the 613 commandments come from. Over half of them come from Deuteronomy. As we talk about, there's one portion in Deuteronomy, Kitei Tzei, that has 72 mitzvot just in the one Torah portion. 72 portions, 72 in one portion. There's a lot of commandments. We just read a whole bunch. I can't remember how many are in Mishpatim. Not 72, but a lot. I mean, like 50, 40 or 50. There's a couple portions, Mishpatim and Kitei Tzei, where between those two, you've got 100 and something, 120. There's a lot. And so there are groupings of them. There's places we go, and we said there's none in Genesis. Well, there's one, circumcise yourselves. By the way, that's the only commandment that we list as one of the 613 that's in Genesis. There's a question of whether be fruitful and multiply is a commandment. And we say it's not a commandment. Because number one, it's not directed just to the Jewish people. Because Adam and Eve are told to be fruitful and multiply. So it can't be a uniquely Jewish commandment. But also it's not a commandment. Because some people can't procreate. So why would God give us a commandment we can't do? Interesting question. There's also the sense that none of the commandments except for circumcision were given to the people before Mount Sinai. And the rabbis are already saying that 2,000 years ago. Now that's weird because we just said that Abraham had the commandments. So on one hand, they want to say that Abraham had the commandments, but did he have all the commandments? Did he have to know all the commandments? Did God just tell him what he needed to know? Oh, and what I was going to tell you is that this idea that Adam and Eve also had the commandments, and that there were people who studied the commandments when like one person would teach the person the commandments. Like there was one guy, Methuselah would teach, Noah the commandments, and then Noah taught his son Shem the commandments. But the other two sons, Japheth and Ham, didn't know the commandments. But Shem taught the commandments to his son Eber, and then Eber taught the commandment, and it went down to Abraham. But if it wasn't for like some of the people, just a couple of the people teaching the commandments wouldn't have reached Abraham, which is in itself another interesting midrash, that even though there weren't that many people at the beginning of the world, there were not a lot of them that wanted to keep the commandments. But again, the idea that they did know this stuff instinctively, or that God had told them that, or when there's only Adam and Eve, he only had to impart them to two people. There's another interesting understanding that they had the commandments, but they weren't really held accountable for them. Only the Jewish people are accountable for the 10 commandments, or for the 613 commandments. Adam and Eve, their family. It seems as though there's a theory, or at least a feeling, or a tendency that Judaism has, which is that at Mount Sinai, when we finally decided that we were going to take the commandments, that no one really, they were there, but nobody really kept them. Nobody wanted to keep them. Nobody said to God, we'll keep them. And so we took that on ourselves. And in exchange, we got God's protection. But that no one else really wanted them, which means that they were really there. God just wanted to make sure somebody kept them. So we kept them, which is interesting because, again, it gets to this issue of like, aren't the commandments for everybody? But there's an understanding that a lot of people can't keep them, which is they can't discipline themselves to do it. We can't discipline. Look, the answer is that Adam and Eve had one commandment. Don't eat of the fruit. They couldn't do it. They had one commandment. You got one commandment. They couldn't keep one commandment. So how can we keep 613? How can most people keep any? So there's that problem that most people don't have enough discipline to keep the commandments. So can the Jewish people keep the commandments? That's like the challenge, right? Can we keep them? And that's what God kind of says to the people. Look, they're here. Can you keep them or not? I don't know. This is This is the challenge. Look, there are people who believe that the commandments are supposed to be kept by Christians. I don't know what to tell you. There's other teachings that they didn't have to be. The early Christians definitely believed that they were supposed to keep the commandments. At a certain time, they said, you don't have to keep the commandments. If you believe in Jesus, that's the law that's now been fulfilled with Jesus. So you have a clear way to get back to the commandments, which is just believing in Jesus. I mean, it's not like just, I mean, you have to believe in Jesus, but if you believe in Jesus, then the laws are fulfilled. But there were other people who said, no, that's you can't just substitute Jesus for the commandments. Look, this is an interesting thing because Glennis, who lives with us again, Glennis is a Seventh-day Adventist, and they believe that the commandments are fulfilled by Jesus. They're not going to say they have to keep the commandments. They don't have to keep the biblical commandments, but they do believe, in an interesting way, that the 10 Commandments are incumbent on everybody, including all Christians. They don't believe all 613 commandments are kept, but that the 10 Commandments are kept. Like somehow, again, it's a teaching. That's not my teaching, it's their teaching. But there are a lot of Seventh-day Adventists. I mean, it's not like she's the only one. There's millions of them. And they believe that God, Jesus was a fulfillment of the law, but not the 10 Commandments. And those are incumbent on everybody. That something happened at Mount Sinai that was incumbent for Christians too, which is why they keep Shabbat. Because Shabbat's the only law in the 10 Commandments that's not like for everybody. Shabbat is in the 10 Commandments. You read it. You just read it. And so they keep Shabbat because God says it in the 10 Commandments, and we keep the 10 Commandments. So they believe the 10. So if you ask, why do Seventh-day Adventists keep Shabbat? Because it's in the 10 Commandments, and they believe the 10 Commandments are inviolate, incumbent on they would believe every person. So becoming Christian believing in Jesus doesn't negate your need to follow the 10 Commandments. So that's why they keep Shabbat. It's not because they picked one law out of the laws and say, we're going to keep Shabbat. They didn't believe that. I'm saying that's not why they keep Shabbat. They keep Shabbat because it's in the 10 Commandments. That's why they keep Shabbat. I don't know what to tell you. So, their religion's only 150 years old. So, go up to Moses, right? Moses, come up with the Mount Moses. I'm going to give them to you. And it says that Moses sent his attendant, Joshua, who ascended the mountain of God. To the elders, he said, wait here for us until we return. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them. So he designates his brother and his other assistant Hur to take care of them. They acted as the leaders, right? Until he comes back. And Moses ascended the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the presence of Adonai abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now, there does seem to be a shift here between what's happening here at Mount Sinai. But no matter what, the idea is that there was God's presence on the mountain. But there seems to be a slightly different version of this story that just started. But it's been combined together. It's fine. It's not a big difference. I'm not pointing it out. Now, the presence of Adonai appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the mountain, right? But God, is up there on Mount Sinai with him. For the Israelites, it looked like a consuming fire at the top of the mountain. That's important. Keep that in mind. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. So Moses goes up into that cloud, but it says that the people saw it as fire. Okay? So they see it as fire. He sees it as a cloud. Now you can understand maybe why they didn't think he was alive anymore. Because what it says is the people saw fire up there.
But maybe it was fire, it was smoke, the cloud.
He sees cloud. That's what he says he sees. But he's up on Mount Sinai. And again, it says that he's there. It says, first of all, this is kind of the confusing part. It says the cloud, the cloud hid it for 6 days. And on the seventh day, God called Moses from the midst of the cloud. So it seems as though there's the first part of the journey up there where he's there and he's in a cloud for 6 days. And on the seventh day, he goes up. And it says the people saw fire. But it says that he's up there for 40 days and 40 nights total, which is obviously a long time. It's over a month. Why is that again important? Because that's when the people went crazy. Because he went up there for 40 days and 40 nights. Did they assume that he was going to be up there? Did he assume he was going to be up there for 40 days and 40 nights? When he says goodbye to the people, he says, God just tells him, come up and I'll give you stone tablets. And again, it says here that he went up with Joshua. He says, these guys are in charge. Aaron and Hur are in charge when I'm gone. It doesn't say anywhere here when Moses goes away, he's giving him any indication he's going to be gone for a really long time. I mean, maybe he didn't know, but he doesn't tell them, he doesn't give them any indication that he's not going to be there for over a month. Again, maybe he didn't know. But here we know that he's up there for 40 days and 40 nights. We know that. Now, why am I focusing on this so much? Well, first of all, as I said, we know that this is when they build a golden calf. This is when they go crazy. The problem is, and we're not going to start this now today.
40 days and 40 nights.
What the problem is, and this is where it gets really why I'm focusing on this now, because I want you to remember this moment. It says that he went up there for 40 days and 40 nights. They don't know that it's going to be 40 days and 40 nights. He doesn't maybe even know that he's going to be up there for 40 days and 40 nights. This is the Bible telling us that's how long he was up there for. The problem is this next section of the Bible that, again, we're not going to start this today, but next week we're just going to be reading Truma. And I think the next week we're going to be reading Tetzaveh. This is about the building of the Mishkan. This is about the rules that God gives him to build the ark. Now, this is what happens when Moses goes up on the mountain. That's not what we just heard he's going to do. I'm only showing it to you because you have it right in front of you. He says to him, I'm going to give you the stone tablets and the commandments, which I've inscribed on them, which seems as though he's going up there to get the 10 commandments. Then the next words are, this is what should happen when people give me gifts. And it goes into the list of all the things that the people gave. And we're going to be reading about it next week and the week after, which is the directions that God gives to Moses for how to build the Mishkan. The problem is that, again, while this happens at Mount Sinai, that's not what we're told he's going up there for. And we forget what happened when he went up there, which is that he was told he was going to go up to get the law. And the people don't know necessarily that he's going to be gone for that long. And I'm not making an excuse for the people, but you can understand why they might have lost it, because they had no idea that this is what was going on up there. And at least according to what the Bible is going to tell us and just introduced us to, this is not what God said I'm bringing you up there for. In all fairness, that's not what it said. That's not what he said to him. Now it's God. God can tell him whatever he wants. But if that's what happens, then God maybe, again, was assuming that the people would be much better behaved down below than they will be, which means God didn't calculate it very well. What was?
Aaron didn't do the job.
Yeah. Aaron. It's not Ben Hur, it's just Hur at this point. He's not the son of Hur, he's just Hur. This is the guy who is Moses' helper. They cannot, yeah, maybe they can't keep the people together. But if the people are only months out of Egypt. And they're already gonna lose it. But we forget, because we get these next chapters about the directions for the Mishkan, we forget the narrative. We forget what's going on with the people. And so it kind of takes us out of that space of the narrative. Okay, since we have time and because we're going to come back to reading this later, let's skip ahead. Let's skip ahead. We're going to skip all the way through all the crazy details that we have, amazing details of what the people were supposed to do in these next portions, Truman Tetzaveh, which are sometimes read as a double portion. They're sometimes read in the same week because they're about the same kinds of things, which are the creation of these things. This is Mike Schwartz's favorite portion, right, Mike?
There it is.
Okay, no, this is still the directions. This is still the directions. What? Yeah, he taught this. Mike taught this section. So this is still going on. I mean, this is all part of this is why people forget what's happening. It's all still going on. Yeah. And then it's still going on. It's still going on into Ki Tisa. It's still going on. It's still going on. Still going on. Still going on. Yeah. Still going on.
Craziness.
Hey. That's where it picks up again.
10 chapters.
Uh-huh. Upon finishing speaking with him on Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 2 tablets of the back, stone tablets inscribed with the figure of God. So now you can make the argument that maybe this last part is part of what was part of the 10 Commandments. This is the law of Shabbat. You know it pretty well, actually.
To repeat.
Yeah, but you know this part pretty well. Right? Right? Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berito lam. Beinu vein b'nei Yisrael. Right? Right there. Et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz v'shamru. That's where it's from. So the next line is, upon finishing speaking to them, God gave Moses the 2 tablets, and that's it. And when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god." So that is why you have to remember what just happened, which is that the narrative just went back to what's happening to the people. Because the last, like you said, the last 8 chapters, we read about these great directions that the people are supposed to do. And until you get to the end of chapter 31, these are all things you're supposed to make: the utensils, the tables, the lampstands, all that. And then we get that. So, by the way, the thing that the rabbis teach us, and we'll talk about it again, we'll repeat it again when we get to it. The reason why God tacks on this little bit about Shabbat is to tell us that the Jews were not supposed to make any of these things on Shabbat. The reason that Vishamru comes here is to remind us that even when you're making stuff for God, you don't do it on Shabbat. So it's pretty serious, right? Whoever does work on Shabbat shall be put to death. That's what it says.
Wow.
Yeah. Observing it throughout all time. So that is the lesson that we take away from this chapter, is that even the holy work of making the tabernacle. We don't do that on Shabbat. And so what do the rabbis derive from that? Any of the things that you do in that, cutting, building, nailing things together, ripping, sewing, any of that kind of stuff. None of those things you do on Shabbat.
Pushing the elevator button.
Pushing an elevator button,
Carrying it out.
creating fire, carrying anything.
Right.
Carrying, well, not carrying anything, carrying anything from a public sphere to a private sphere, moving stuff from your house to another place outside of your house. You can carry things around your house, but you can't carry something from your house. So we're carrying an umbrella in your house. You just can't carry, just can't. You said umbrella. You can carry a backpack, whatever, around your house. You can move it around your house, but you can't take it from your house outside. Unless you create an eruv, and if you build an eruv, then you can carry it. So if you create a private space that's not just your house, then you can carry stuff. And that's why people create an eruv. And there's one on Ventura Boulevard, and there's one off Coldwater, right? You tie a string to the light posts, and you can create a designated area that you can carry stuff around. So you can push a stroller in that area, you can carry your stuff within that space,
I never heard that.
and that's how you make an eruv. It's a legal fiction. It's a way of creating something that will allow us to not violate the law of carrying on Shabbat, because that's the toughest thing on Shabbat. If you can cut off everything else, like cutting and burning stuff and creating a fire, that's the issue with the elevator, right? Is creating a spark. It's not making the elevator work, it's making electricity create a spark. So if you don't create the spark, then it's fine. Which is why some people will get into a Shabbat elevator, because the elevator's already moving. They're not creating they're not creating it. But you can't start a car because the car wasn't on. Which is why some people put things on timers, because as long as it's on a timer, they didn't turn it on. There is the logic behind it. I mean, I would still say it's kind of a way of getting around it, but yeah, I mean, if you put your television or if you put your thing on now again, technically speaking, if your computer's already on, you didn't turn it on.
But if you start typing on it, you're doing something.
Yeah, but you're not initiating a new spark. You're not creating a new spark. So you could argue that you could do it. Why? There's no question that if you have a computer, if your computer has a sleep mode, yes, but you can disable that too. I know, but if you're very observant, you could do it on Friday. You could disable it and then turn it back on. So people do that. I mean, there's people who say, well, I can be on my computer. There's other people who say you don't go on your computer on Shabbat. It's clearly a violation.
Putting a timer on lights than anything else. And sometimes on something to keep it warm.
There's another way around that, right? Is to not turn off your lights, which is awesome. So no, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, it's not like you have to sit in darkness. If the light was on, you can have it leave on. Yes. And so if you leave a special stove on that is always on a low heat, you can do that. You can keep your food warm. You just can't turn it on. If you leave it on, then it's okay. You did that once, huh? But yeah, well, it's not their fault. And then yeah, but seriously, Joanne, that's why we have cholent, right? We have cholent because it's a stew that you can leave on and you can just leave it on. And that's why people like cholent, because it's a good stew that just gets better over time. Well, it can be good too. If people are good at making it, but it's like a chili, right? It's like you don't want to eat. You got to let the chili sit for a while. You can't just serve it right away. So yeah, that's why we have cholent, that's why we have it, because it sits on a they call them a blech. It's a blech. It's a heater that it's a heating unit that stays on. So that's how people are able to not turn on fire on Shabbat. Again, look, I think the spirit of the law is the important thing. Look, we had a rule for a long time in our house that you didn't turn the TV on Shabbat. We didn't have an issue with turning on lights. We had no issue with turning on lights. Turned off lights. We didn't think about it. But for us, the law of not watching TV in our house was based on the fact that the TV takes us away from each other, and that's true. But she's more Shabbat observant than I am. She takes it seriously though. Stop. That's terrible. She's my Shabbos goy. I'm going to send her out. I'm going to send her out to do my work on, because you're not supposed to. That's one of the things that the 10 Commandments says. You don't have your servants or your family do your work. So I know. Well, she's also not supposed to do she's definitely not supposed to do your work on Shabbat. But
Saturday or Sunday.
Saturday. That's why Seventh-day Adventists are diligent about keeping Shabbat. So they go to church on Saturday. Their church services are on Saturday. She works on Sunday. She doesn't treat Sunday with any special, but they are very observant on Saturday. That's why they're called Seventh-day Adventists, because they believe in the seventh day. They believe that the seventh day is what you're supposed to do. So they believe that the church made a mistake when they moved it to Sunday. They believe that the Catholic Church made a huge concession to paganism to do that by changing the day to Sunday, which was the day that the Romans worshiped their sun god. They said that was a concession to paganism, which they shouldn't have made. But look, it's one of the things that determined Seventh-day Adventists, how Seventh-day Adventists became unique. And they're not the only people that keep the seventh. They're the largest of the Sabbatarian movements within the Christian church. But remember, the Christian church originally kept Shabbat. So it wasn't an issue until the Roman Catholic Church decided to change it, which was not a popular decision for all Christians at the time. Anyways, the point is that Shabbat is pretty important. It's right there. And she loves our traditions for keeping Shabbat. So one of the things that we've done in Judaism is we've embellished the day with really cool things like doing a kiddush and hamotzi and lighting candles. Correct. So next week we will read the laws of the Mishkan. I will tell you that this is for people who are interested in details. It's a really interesting portion. No, but it is not.
It's very detailed.
It's very detailed. We'll leave it at that, folks.
This was my one from Bar Mitzvah.
It was Bar Mitzvah.
And I bought this one like.
Did you see this? Did you see his Bar Mitzvah top? His Laura?
I just found it.
I saw, I think.
Yeah. It's pictures. Yeah, it is. It's an older Jewish text, but it's a Jewish text. Everybody, take care. It's good to see you all. We're glad you're part of this study of Torah that includes lots of different references, but we're glad to have the King James and the new and the NIV here too. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks, Rabbi. Bye,
Bye.
Joyce.
Bye. Take care.
Will do.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Taught you.
Love to you